Welcome to Wendell, a place I've never lived, but in which my family roots are pretty deep. Well, the family roots cover a larger area than that. There's also Buell, as well as Hagerman. Jerome is nearby, but I can't remember that anyone ever lived there. Coxes, Stevensons, and several other ancestral lines have lived in Idaho for generations. My dad's parents both grew up here. The pictures you will see are of Wendell as it looks today, or at least as it looked the day after Thanksgiving 2018. The voice you hear that isn't mine is Joyce Cox's. She's my grandma, and took me on a tour of the sites to help me with this project.
Left? Right. Oh, we're going to Annihila's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Left?
Sorry.
Okay.
You knew.
Well, you were motioning to this direction, so I thought that's where we were going.
Oh, I'm losing my mind here.
She knows everything about Wendell. The Idaho story starts more or less with Horatio Cox and Ophelia Brady. I like to imagine it as an alternate version of Hamlet, where Ophelia recognizes that Hamlet is like a really bad boyfriend and gets with Horatio, who's a pretty solid guy. And they both leave Denmark before everyone starts dying, and they wind up in Idaho instead. Not as exciting as the poison and mass slaughter version, but maybe healthier. In reality, the two met and married while they lived in Fairview, Utah. At the time, Horatio worked in transporting timber. He had lost a couple of tablespoons of brain matter in a logging accident. And Ophelia's family slept in a hayloft. The night of their wedding, someone replaced their bed sheets with coarse flannel and filled the bed with horsehair. After moving back and forth between Mesa, Arizona and Fairview, Utah, they settled on a 40-acre farm west of Buell. They lived in this house, which was originally in Buell, but was then sold to the city, and then later the structure was sold in auction to Anila. And sorry, fill me in, who's Anila?
What?
Who's Anila?
Anila is Grandpa's cousin.
Okay.
That's why she's got Horatio and Ophelia's house on her land.
Right.
And they brought it over from Buell.
The move to Buell happened in 1914, and in 1916, Jordan Everett Cox was born. He grew up to be a barber and a writer of ironic country verse about family history and outhouses. Here is the site of one of the houses where he lived and raised his family.
I'm looking down here. No, that's not it. Okay, that's the place that they lived on.
The brown
Right
house.
there. And they've changed the house. To me, it does not look a whole lot different. It was not a fancy house. And they had a big red barn, and if you look, you can see where it's now fallen down.
Oh, yeah.
But they had that big red barn, and the house has been changed, but it looks pretty similar.
This is the house in which he lived later in life, and in which my grandparents live now. My grandma's family, Stevensons and Andersons, came from Denmark in the late 1860s and early 1870s, and traveled from New York to Ogden on the recently completed Transcontinental Railroad. By so doing, they avoided dying of dysentery on the Mormon Trail. They settled at first near Preston, Idaho, but by the 1920s and 30s, had pretty much all moved to Wendell. Some of the houses where my grandma lived as a young girl are still standing, others are not. This rocky patch of ground was where one of the farms stood, but the city later bought the land and built a sewage treatment plant.
They used to farm this after my dad passed away. They would farm it, but then as they've had need, because he sold it to the city, and the other side has a lot of rocks. It was a rocky area you couldn't farm anyway, so it was a good spot for the sewage, but we didn't realize they were going to just take it.
This is what Grandma calls the big house. This is another house. Point is, she's been around for a while. Here she is talking about some of the ways the area has changed in her lifetime. Dairy farming, for instance, has been a major livelihood for a long time, but
it wasn't anything like it is now. And they were grass-fed. They had pastures, fed them hay in the winter. But now they just keep them all in. They had loafing sheds for them in the winter, so they were protected, kind of like these loafing sheds, only they had a back to them.
Here she is talking about the increasing division and privatization of land.
A lot of this used to be just desert. We would ride horses out here in the desert, just wherever, no fences or anything. So, and Pat, because I was younger, I would ride behind her, behind the saddle. And we rode all over the place. I loved it. It was wonderful. And not as many houses. And now they've settled the land, they've cleared the land. Which is a good thing. We don't need a lot of sagebrush. But it was fun at the time.
From here, we head into town. Simmerlee's is the local grocery store and has apparently been here forever. The times are changing, though, as evidenced by the coming of Redbox. They've also learned Italian, which is cool. Some community fixtures, like the Ace movie theater, are long since defunct. Others, such as the Silver Spur, are alive and well. Others still have been transformed, like this building, which was the St. Valentine's Hospital, and now functions as Magic Valley Manor, a home for the aging. And the people of Wendell aren't all white anymore, which seems like it's probably a good thing. Granted, Grandpa says it hasn't been all that long since they stopped burning crosses over in Buell, but progress is progress. This is Wendell. Consider yourself welcomed.
And I hurried to the depot, as happy as a clam. When I got to Pocatello, my troubles began to grow. I was waiting in the sagebrush, the rain, the wind, the snow, way out in Idaho, way out in Idaho.